February 5th, 1919. Nashville, Tennessee. The sky stretched wide and endless above a young girl named Cornelia Fort. She was born into a rich family. Her father was one of the founders of a famous insurance company, and the family home was large and grand. But Cornelia was not interested in the comforts of wealth. She had a wild spirit and a heart set on something far beyond the grounds of her family home. She wanted to fly. From early childhood, she was fascinated by airplanes. When she was 5, her father took her and her brothers to see a barnstorming show where pilots flew daring tricks. The roar of the engines, the gleam of the wings against the sky, it captured something inside her that could never be tamed. Her father worried, of course, about the dangers of flying. He made his sons promise never to get into a plane, but he never thought to stop Cornelia. Maybe he knew she was different, as she grew so that her passion for the skies. She earned her pilot's license and went on to become the second woman in Tennessee to get a commercial pilot's license. Soon after, she earned her instructor's license, becoming the first woman in Tennessee allowed to teach others to fly. Cornelia's path was set. The sky called to her louder than anything else ever had. By 1940, at just 21 years old, Cornelia was working as a flight instructor. She taught soldiers, sailors, and defense workers how to master the art of flying. Her skill was UN-matched. Her calm was a comforting presence in the cockpit. She was known for her patience. Students who struggled with hard moves found support in her steady voice. Those who feared heights or engine failure learned courage from her example. She treated every flight as a lesson, not just in skill, but in confidence. Cornelia believed that flying was not just a skill, it was a mindset. She taught her students to trust their instincts, to read the wind and the clouds, and to never panic when things went wrong. Flying, she would say, was about control. Not control of the aircraft alone, but control of yourself. In the months before December 1941, Cornelia moved to Hawaii to work as a civilian flight instructor at the John Rogers Airport near Honolulu. The islands were beautiful. The weather was perfect for flying. She spent her days in the cockpit, guiding young pilots through their first takeoffs and landings. She loved the work. She loved the freedom of the sky. And she loved the feeling of teaching someone else to experience that same freedom. But on the morning of December 7th, 1941, everything changed. December 7th, 1941. Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. Cornelia was in the air, teaching a young student how to take off and land. The sky was clear. The ocean shimmered below them. Suddenly, the quiet morning was broken by the roar of dozens of engines. She looked up and came face to face with the rising sun, symbol of Japanese warplanes. In an instant, she wrestled control from her student's hands and pulled up just in time to avoid a crash in midair. Smoke curled into the sky as bombs fell on the harbor below. Fighters zipped past in deadly groups. Cornelia landed her plane at the civilian airport in John Rogers, just as bullets hit the runway. Chaos ruled the moment, but Cornelia's courage did not fail. She and her student ran for cover in the hail of gunfire. The airport manager was killed. 2 civilian planes never returned that day. Cornelia Fort became the first American pilot to witness the attack on Pearl Harbor from the air. Her story spread quickly. She was praised not just for her bravery, but for giving the country a first-hand story of a day that changed history forever. In the days that followed, Cornelia wrote about what she saw. Her words were printed in magazines and newspapers across the country. She described the chaos, the fear, and the strength she felt in those moments. She described how the world she knew disappeared in an instant, replaced by fire and smoke and the sound of war. She wrote about her student, who had stayed calm even as bullets tore through the air around them. She wrote about the airport manager who had been killed and the pilots who never came back. And she wrote about the moment she realized that her life and the lives of everyone around her had changed forever. The attack meant change for everyone. Civilian flights were stopped. and Cornelia returned to the mainland United States, ready to do her part for the war. She knew she could fly, she knew she could teach, and she knew that the country needed pilots more than ever before. She was set on helping in any way she could. In 1942, Nancy Love recruited Cornelia to join the newly formed Women's Auxiliary Ferrying Squadron, the WAFS. This was the start of women serving as military pilots. Cornelia was the second woman to join the WAFS. Her job was to fly military aircraft from factories to air bases across the United States. This work freed male pilots to fight overseas. It was dangerous work. Many planes were new and untested, and airfields were often hidden or hard to find. Cornelia flew in open cockpits, in bad weather, and without radios. She found her way by matching maps with the land below her, and put up with freezing cold and long hours. She flew dozens of different aircraft, trainers, fighters, bombers, each one with its own problems and challenges. Some had engines that got too hot. Some had broken instruments. Some had been put together quickly and showed signs of poor work. But Cornelia flew them all. She became known for her drive and skill. Other women pilots looked up to her for her courage and strength. The women of the WAFs were pioneers. They proved that women could fly military aircraft just as well as men. They proved that gender was no barrier to skill, courage, or commitment. And they proved that women could serve their country in ways that had never been dreamed of before. But the work was not without risk. Cornelia wrote letters to her mother during this time. In them, she described the challenges of flying planes across the country. She described the long hours, the bad weather, and the constant pressure to deliver aircraft on time. She also described the pride she felt in doing work that mattered. "Ah," she said. In one letter, she wrote, "I have yet to have a feeling other than pride at being chosen to serve my country in the uniform of my country." She was proud of what she was doing. She was proud of the women she served with, and she was proud to be part of something bigger than herself. The women pilots faced doubt from military leaders who did not believe women belonged in the cockpit. They faced cold stares from male pilots who thought they were taking jobs away from men. They faced long days and nights away from home, sleeping in barracks and cheap hotels, eating bad food, and flying in all kinds of weather. But they kept going, they kept flying, and they kept proving that they belonged. Cornelia became one of the most skilled pilots in the program. She flew more missions than almost anyone else. She delivered fighters, bombers, and training planes to bases all over the country. She flew through storms, through fog, and through nights so dark she could barely see the instruments in front of her. She never complained. She never asked for special treatment. She just did the job. But Cornelia's story is not just one of bravery. It is also one of tragedy. March 21st, 1943. Near Merkel, Texas. On that day, Cornelia was flying in a group with other pilots, moving BT-13 trainers from Long Beach, California, to Love Field in Dallas. The sky was clear, but the risks of flying in close formation were high. Flight Officer Frank Stammer, Jr. was coming near Cornelia's plane, flying too close. On a close pass, the landing gear of his plane hit the left wing of Cornelia's BT-13. 6 feet of her plane's wing was torn off. The tip of the wing was broken clean. Cornelia's plane went into a dive she could not stop. Frank Stam was able to control his plane, but Cornelia was not so lucky. She crashed about 10 miles south of Merkel, in Mulberry Canyon. At just 24 years old, Cornelia Fort became the first female pilot in American history to die on active duty. Her death sent shockwaves through the young program and the military community. She had been one of the most skilled pilots among the WASP, Women Air Force Service pilots, a shining example of the courage and skill women brought to flying. Her commanding officer, Nancy Love, sent a letter to Cornelia's mother. The words were filled with grief and respect. "My feeling about the loss of Cornelia is hard to put into words. I can only say that I miss her terribly and loved her. If there can be any comforting thought, it is that she died as she wanted to, in an army airplane, and in the service of her country." Cornelia's grave has the simple words, "Killed in the service of her country." Her memory would inspire generations of women in the military and in flying. In the years after her death, Cornelia's family and friends remembered her as someone who lived life on her own terms. She had refused to accept the limits placed on women. She had refused to believe that flying was a man's world. And she had refused to let fear stop her from going after her dreams. Cornelia's mother kept her letters. She read them often, finding comfort in her daughter's words. She found pride in the work Cornelia had done, and in the memory she had left behind. Cornelia's fellow WASP pilots remembered her as a leader and a friend. They remembered her laugh, her drive, and her strong belief in the meaning of their work. They carried her memory with them as they kept flying planes across the country, honoring her loss with every flight. The WASP program continued after Cornelia's death. More women joined, more planes were flown, more missions were completed. But every woman who flew knew the risks. They knew that flying was dangerous. They knew that they could die, and they flew anyway. By the end of the war, the WASP had flown more than 60 million miles. They had delivered more than 12,000 aircraft. They had tested hundreds of repaired planes, and 38 of them had died in the line of duty. For years, their story was forgotten. The government did not give them military status. They were not given veteran benefits. They were not honored for their service. It was as if their work had never happened. But in 1977, President Jimmy Carter signed a law that gave the WASP full military status. In 2010, the WASP were awarded the Congressional Gold Medal, the highest civilian honor in the United States. By that time, most of the women who had served were gone, but their memory lived on. Cornelia's story is one of daring and strength. From her early days as a girl in love with planes to her role as a trailblazer in the skies, she dared to fly when few women are allowed to dream it. She faced danger head-on, whether from enemy fire at Pearl Harbor or the dangers of flying unknown aircraft across the country. Her life was brief, but brilliant. In the years since, Cornelia Fort has become a symbol of women's pioneering spirit during World War II. The WASP program carried on her name and her bravery, with women pilots flying thousands of aircraft, testing planes, and serving their country in ways once thought impossible. Her final battle, in the skies above Texas, is a reminder of the sacrifices made by women whose courage helped win the war. Today, the story of Cornelia Fort lives on in museums, books, and the hearts of those who honor the women who dared to take to the skies and change history. In Nashville, a park has her name. In Texas, a memorial marks the place where she fell. And across the United States, women pilots remember her every time they climb into a cockpit and take to the sky. Cornelia Fort dared the skies. She dared to dream, she dared to serve, and she dared to prove that women belonged in the air just as much as men. Her story is proof of courage, strength, and the spirit of those who refuse to be told they cannot fly.